guys, what is going on? Redmaster here, and welcome back to Cards and Castles. Now today, we are going to be looking into the Crusader faction, similar to how we did with the Viking faction, continuing on that sort of trend, and analyzing really how they've been changed since the Enchanted Grove. Some positives, some negatives here and there, but we'll go over all that, and it's going to be a pretty similar format to how I've done the Vikings. I think this is a pretty helpful series. I mean, at least I hope so for those of you who are maybe new or still trying to figure out what is happening with some of these factions. So with that being said, let's jump right into the Crusader faction. So where to start with this faction? Well, the Crusaders are a faction that pride themselves on giving either units or buildings lots of health so they can last longer, which is generally something that's very useful in a game where you're trying to, of course, destroy other units. Making sure your guys survive longer with extra health can be somewhat necessary. A majority of the cards found in Crusaders do primarily like to either heal or give health in some form or fashion. You see with cards like Cleric, which can heal an ally for 4 on combo, the Church healing a damaged ally for 1 each turn, or giving units that 1/2 you can see there, healing castle for 3, healing target for 10. So there's a lot of health oriented spells in this, but that is not what the Crusaders only do. They're also pretty heavily favored, or heavily liked actually, by players for their card draw. It's pretty important in your in this kind of game to keep a good hand to make sure that you're not running low on cards, because then you'll tend to see a shift in a match. You'll usually end up seeing a person with lower cards winning, or well, winning at first, but then of course take a dive because they're not able to support what they have on the board. So card draw is a very important resource, and giving it solely to the Crusaders has become important. Because we are seeing a lot more Crusader decks out there right now. The red yellows, the purple yellows, the blue yellows, they're all pretty big decks, each, of course, having their own methods of winning or playing, if you will. But they all, of course, have draw in them. Things like the Reinforce, cards like Flying Books, Crumbling Archives, Divine Knowledge. Making sure your hand, of course, keeps... I don't want to say is full, because it's not always is full, but it's at a good point. It's at a sizable point where you know that you may not be able to run out of resources. You can always keep supporting what you put out on the board, and that is again pretty important to a game like this. And going along with the health and card draw, you also have a lot of abilities here that sort of manipulate health, whether that be to the enemies or your own units. Things like armor have returned, where you can see here armor absorbs the first X amount of damage, so in armor 2, it sort of subtracts 2 from your opponent's attacks. Or judgment. We know judgment's a very prominent and strong ability, actually. Well, the courthouse should be there, but we can see judgment of dealing damage to enemies that attack this unit. So there are a lot of cool side abilities that also manipulate the health of units or buildings on the board, which is nice. It gives the Crusaders a lot of sort of diversity to do things, and of course some other various spells here and there that all provide their sort of own unique assistance to you, if that makes any sense. We have cards like Deflecting Shield, giving a unit deflect. The Sacred Quest, making sure they can draw a card. Journey of Faith, even giving the Stalwart. So there's a lot of different spells that can certainly just be played around with, just to help out your units or hurt the enemy, depending on how you want to play with the Crusaders. As powerful as the Crusader faction is, however, they are not without their own weaknesses like the various other factions. Now, with Crusaders, their power tends to lie within their late stage cards, their late game, well, I said cards twice, but that doesn't matter. With cards like Arbiters Return, Genevieve, Luminaris, Craxus, and even Dremoth, we can see that a lot of the Crusaders' power, like I said, can be utilized more towards the late stages of a game. So you can kind of classify their weakness as being early game in that sort of regard, and that's not entirely true because you do have cards like Knight of the Flowers, Guardian, Flying Books, Dwarf Paladin. They can all prove some use, but that's their power is more towards their units. You know, Courthouse is okay to come out, but wasting 3 gold to get it out there leaves yourself quite open. Same with Crumbling Archive, same with Divine Knowledge. So essentially, these Crusader cards, while some are powerful in the early stages, their late game is where they really shine. If you want to if you want to take down Crusaders, you're going to need to hit them in the early game where it hurts and establish some sort of control, so they're forced on the defensive. Something that while Crusaders do have the health to do, they usually don't over excel at. And that's where factions like Warlocks and Pirates come in, making Crusaders that much more powerful. They use the other factions to help them out in the early game and come back in the late game. So, with that being said, though, Crusader definitely a great faction. But let's head into some of the cards that have been changed with the Enchanted Grove that I think are the most powerful and the most dangerous, or need to be, well, not need to be looked at. The ones to watch out for. That's what I was trying to get at. Like I said, in the Enchanted Grove expansion. Forgot the name for a second. Moving on. First card we'll be taking a look at is actually Reinforce, the 2 gold spell that gives a building or castle +2 health, and you can draw a card. Now, originally this card was, or could only be used with units that had 2 or even 1 or less, I think, movement, which was a pretty difficult spell to use. It did give a nice stat buff. I think it was like around 3/3 maybe, not entirely sure. But again, it was very hard to use. With Reinforce now, though, I do tend to use it in my Crusader decks a lot because it does 2 things that can help a game. It not only gives your castle 2 health, which is pretty good to make sure that you can survive longer, sort of outplay them in sudden death if you have to, but also draws a card, which, like I mentioned more towards the beginning of the video, is very important in a game like this. You want to keep your hand, like, open with options is probably a good way to describe it. You want to have a lot of resources that you can use at different times, and Reinforce is a good cycling card to do so. We have seen a lot of cantrips, a lot of cycle cards recently emerge from this, but I think Reinforce is one of the better ones because you can also give your building health, or castle more specifically, health that can help you maybe outlast in sudden death. If neither of you can get a hit against each other, you'll have that Reinforce to make sure that you can outlast an opponent, which can be pretty useful. But more importantly is the draw factor, like I mentioned earlier. So overall, Reinforce has become a much better card, and one that I would say is great, a great addition for any sort of Crusader deck that's being run out there. Next card we'll be taking a look at is the Knight of Flowers. Now, the Knight of Flowers was originally a neutral card before the Enchanted Grove, and did give your castle a healing of 2, not additional health, healing. So, meaning that they cannot exceed 20. But regardless, the Knight of Flowers now has become an extremely powerful mid-game Crusader, or late early, early middle game unit. As you can see on your screen here, 3 gold, 2/3, and an awaken of gaining 2/2, putting it up to 4/5 the following turn. Now that's pretty good stats for a card at that stage of the game. It definitely can be a pain in the ass to get rid of it at that 4/5 stage with the options that you have, but it illustrates the power that they have given Crusaders in a sense. More specifically, Crusader Awakenings. This card is not only a strong mid-game unit for a lot of Crusader decks, but it also opened up the possibility of, Warlock Crusader Awaken, which originally was thought to not exist and only existing within the green-red and the purple-red. That's what I was thinking of, yep. So it does open up a new sort of awakening option, which is really neat to see, but like I said, it's also a very strong late, early, mid-game unit, which is extremely difficult to take down and has become a great unit to run in nearly any deck. Its overall diversity that it has, fitting into nearly any deck, is just too great. And I would say Knight of Flowers, if you aren't running it, I would strongly recommend taking a look and adding it, because it is only a common. So I think a lot of people should have this card. If you don't, that's quite alright. It is a common. But again, just showing the Crusader power that they have here by becoming a 4/5 and more if you have Warlock Weir reawakening. It's always difficult for me to say that word kind of fastly because it just comes out a mess. But anyway, great card, and I'd like to see maybe more Crusader Awaken integration in the future. Next up, we have the Hands of the Saint. Now, this card has actually been heavily utilized by people on the ladder recently, and it's kind of clear to see why. For 4 gold, you can heal any target, including the castle, for 10. That's a pretty big number. This number is actually only found in one other place in the Crusader faction, and we'll get into that other place later on. But Hand to the Saint overall has become just an extremely useful heal for a lot of people out there. And for 4 gold too, that's pretty cheap compared to the other option. So with healing 10, you could pretty much bring your castle back up to half of its full stats and can pretty much outlast an opponent depending on where they're at or what they have. It's a great card that I think may be more utilized as more people start to see it, because a lot of people are heading towards that Crusader faction, and if you haven't already tried to use Hand of the Saint, maybe 1 or 2 copies in your deck. It is a common, like the I'm trying to remember the card I just went over, which is a pain in the ass. Let me have to look back now, son of a bitch. Knight of Flowers. That I would not have thought of that. It is common just like the Knight of Flowers, so you know, if you don't already have this, it's a great heal card to start incorporating into your Crusader decks. It is 10, it's a very powerful number. It is nearly half the castle, as I keep repeating. So, very good card. I like this change to, I don't know what this card was, if beforehand, or if this is, I think it was, no, it had to be around during, yeah, no, it was around in Dwarves and Dinosaurs, but I forgot what it did. Anyway, I mean, that just goes to show how far this expansion has come. It's just done so much to overhaul the game, and it's been quite an amazing sight to see how many people are getting rejuvenated by this. But anyway, I'm kind of getting sidetracked here. Let's move on to our next card, because Hand of the Saint, very good card, but I think it's time to move on. Next up, we have the Arbiters Return. Now, this is the other place that I told you that you could find the 10 heal for, and this one can only go towards your castle. But it kind of has 2 purposes, and something that is extremely valuable for this card. It not only heals your castle to about half its original health, but you're also getting the Judge Dramatic Summon. And I would say next, they're pretty equal in terms of which one is utilized more. I would say that the heal, of course, might be more of the reason, but the Judge's Dramatic Entrance is not to be overlooked. With Dramatic Entrance, of course, we can play any sort of Dramatic Entrance card in the 3x3 in the center of the field, and what that does, it creates some scary removal. In a game where the health is sort of more stat line to about 4 or 3, with cards like Arbiter's Return coming out, you can pretty much act at, or have this card act as not only healing for your castle, but removal. And removal is something that a lot of people think isn't too prevalent outside of the Warlock faction. So having that removal in another faction like Crusaders is pretty big to make it sort of stand out as a overall, you know, I could do anything sort of faction. So, a great card, you know, we've seen this a lot recently. The Dramatic Entrance being utilized to actually end some games in some instances. But again, the healing, the Dramatic Entrance Judge, extremely strong combo, and one that I, you know, think is not going away anytime soon. And finally, out of our cards to go over today, I decided to take a look at Jonesy. I decided to show you guys her change. And she did actually have quite a change. She originally did have that sort of initiative deal, I think 4 damage in a 3x3 radius of where she was being summoned, and that really only worked in replacement decks, and because of this we sort of saw Jonesy see very limited play. However, I think the way she is now, she has definitely become more of a dangerous card. Not only does she have armor 3, which is incredibly powerful armor on its own, not only does it have deflect, the ability that, of course, no enemy spells can target Genevieve. It also has Resolve, and Resolve I think is probably one of the more important ones here out of the three. Don't get me wrong, Armor and Deflect are both very powerful, and I would argue that Deflect might be more powerful than Resolve for this card, but I chose Resolve as the probably most significant effect of Genevieve because not a lot of people can support Genevieve's Resolve. They can't defend properly against it, and they end up actually leaving her out for an additional turn, meaning she gains that armor 3 back, putting her back up to a 3/4. So, and her utilizing the Knight tag of just being powered up by the stables and any sort of Knight buffs, she does become a crazy card. And one that I think is just pretty powerful right now, no matter how you look at it. And even if you don't use Knights of the Faction, people have been throwing Genevieve into their Crusader decks because she can end up pretty much trading with a lot of enemy units, which, again, it can be quite useful in a game where you need to take out those units, and not much explanation needed there in a sense. But overall, Genevieve, a very powerful card, a very strong card, and one of the best changes I've seen to her in a long time. That being said, guys, that's going to do it for today's video. If you guys did enjoy, please be sure to hit that like button, share with your friends, and comment down below what you think of the Crusader faction now, post Enchanted Grove update. I do want to continue more videos like this, not only for the factions like I had planned to do, but for different archetypes as well. Zombies, knights, rats. I think a lot of people are benefiting from this, and I hope that if you're watching this, you are benefiting in some sort of fashion. Or if not, tell me what I'm doing wrong in the comment section below. Help me improve the series, help change it up. I do really want to make this a, great beginner series for people to learn about what exactly is happening. But with that being said, guys, if you haven't clicked that subscribe button already, be sure to do that. I don't know if I said this already, but I'm going to say it again if I already did. Click that subscribe button. Help the channel grow just by, clicking that subscribe, helping us support the channel. I think I said click the subscribe button 3 times now. Anyway, guys, that's going to do it for me. So until next time, stay gaming.